Stuart Tuna from Silver Cup Studios, Long Island City, Queens. New York City does have 5 boroughs, and this seems to be a Brooklyn panel. Other than a few references to Billy Rudin sitting behind me, maybe some of the vision for how this thing can really grow is the Rudin certainly took a lot of, really looked at Lower Manhattan early on. Maybe some of the visions, not just Long Island City, which is taken off on its own, but it's also the next Willentis family should be looking at the Bronx. I mean, talk about some cheap real estate and some great opportunities, and maybe some great infrastructure that we can really expand beyond just Brooklyn and Manhattan. What are your thoughts on that, Prashant?
Well, I personally believe that Queens is the next place that we really need to think about in terms of all of this. I mean, obviously, you look at the area around Court Square, and you understand that you're 12 minutes from Midtown Manhattan. It's an extraordinary opportunity, but I'd like to hear what the panel thinks about our fair borough of Queens.
Well, look, the MetLife story was the famous story about how not to do it. You can't pop up a high-rise office building and forget about the rest and expect it to really take hold. And I think, in Brooklyn, we've been waiting for a very long time. I happen to be part of the movement to bring companies to Brooklyn when they would come over in bulletproof limousines because Mayor Koch insisted that they look in Brooklyn. They would have to get out of the car because the mayor would insist that they look, and they couldn't get back in that car quick enough and head over the bridge, and we never saw them again. And so, Queens is just leagues ahead of where Brooklyn was, even 5 to 10 years ago. I mean, it's ready and it's happening, and I think that it is interesting that we're up here, sort of, being the fact that Brooklyn is now getting a little bit of a bad rap for constantly being sort of in the headline is kind of interesting because it's been our front yard, our backyard, and our side yard forever, and it has just recently stopped apologizing for not being Manhattan. I mean, not to those of us that have made a career there, but certainly for the rest of the world looking in. And I think that Queens' moment is here, and it will happen, and it is already happening.
I was working on a big project in Manhattan, and one of the developers said, "We need some Brooklyn in this project." I almost fell out of my chair. But just staying with you for a second, Marianne, in terms of this Queens issue, you are working on these co-location facilities. You look at Roosevelt Island and the Cornell Technion campus. How do you think about Queens as you stare at that drawing and you understand how close, all of that is? Do you think that we need, for instance, better transportation from Roosevelt Island into Western Queens? How do you see the relationship?
I think the water represents an enormous opportunity, and the water is one of the great benefits of Roosevelt Island and its connectivity to Queens and to Manhattan, and I think that there's a lot of room there. I think it's also about a brand and building a brand, and there is no better brand than a great university like Cornell, and I think that the kind of place that tenants and members want to be is completely aligned with what Cornell wants to do there, and I don't think it's as isolated as some people think it is. You have to go there to know that, of course, but I don't think it needs any more transportation than it has. It needs a better marketing campaign, and it needs a better brand building, which is going to happen over the coming months and years with Cornell's deep commitment to the location, because the fundamentals are absurdly good.
Okay, unless there's another burning
I might just add that I think the Roosevelt Island Queens connection is very good, and Long Island City is very well poised. Queens is also, when we look longer term, where a lot of the big redevelopment soft sites are, places like Sunnyside Yards, and that's as we move through the city and we do the Brooklyn thing. When we get to Queens, those are the kinds of sites. Let's just throw out there one other sort of much longer term ideas, because we're thinking of places that seem inaccessible from one perspective, but in fact are very accessible from another. And I think the South Bronx becomes an idea like that. There's a sort of idea that's been up and down over the years, which is start looking at JFK and look at all the land around JFK and say, in fact, that's a pretty accessible place, and it's accessible to a lot of the rest of the world. So we have city competitors in the Middle East and elsewhere who are really building up their airport areas and concentrating investment there, and that may be a longer term play for us too.